My name is Melissa Rebronja, also known as EMAR, your host. And today we have a very special guest, Jeff Brown. Welcome, Jeff.
Thanks, Melissa. Happy to be here.
Jeff Brown is an author, filmmaker, grounded spiritualist. I like that a lot. Not just a spiritualist, but a grounded spiritualist. Jeff has written and released books such as Soulshaping, Ascending with Both Feet on the Ground, which I have here. Thank you very much. Beautiful. Love It Forward. And your new book is coming out, which is called An Uncommon Bond, and that's very exciting. I've seen some quotes from that book, and it's amazing. One thing I like about you is that you're really, really good with words. You write beautiful, beautiful words that I can relate to, that I think many people relate to. And you just have such a beautiful expression that is very gentle and soothing to the soul. Almost like a permission to feel, permission to be, and to invite kindness into our lives. And I think that's beautiful about you. So that's Jeff Brown. Very nice to have you.
Nice to be with you.
Thank you. There's been a lot of talk about, you've actually written a blog post called Apologies to the Divine Feminine, from a warrior in transition. So there's a lot of talk of like the wounded feminine and all of us healing the feminine within. But now there's also this talk about men being in feminine energy, but then there's like another level to come through it and come to the evolved masculine. What is your opinion on that?
After I wrote the Apologies to the Divine Feminine, I then wrote and had a much harder time writing a counterpiece, Apologies to the Sacred Masculine.
Okay.
And then after that, it was like, okay, so now we've apologized. Now what? Where are we going? And where are we going as men, and where are we going as women, and where are we going together? And is it the same thing? And I just sat in that question for a long time. What does the awakened masculine look like? And how different is he from the awakened feminine? And, you know, and part of what informs my experiences, and I wrote a lot about this in Uncommon Bond, was a soulmate experience that I had. And in the highest point and the deepest point of connection, gender seemed to completely evaporate. We were gendered and relating sexually in a gendered way, but there was a way in which it became insignificant or inconsequential, as though we had transcended gender or included gender or something and gone through some portal to some other way of informing and interpreting experience. As I wrote the Awakening Man piece, it seemed to be moving in the direction of something that was not very different from how I would describe the awakening feminine. You know, I mean, David Data would have a very different opinion. It would be much more lodged in a much more traditional idea of the masculine.
Yes.
That's what man is, and I'm just I don't certainly pretend to have the answer to this question, but I'm not entirely convinced that's true. I'm not sure because in my most inclusive experiences, it just didn't seem to matter very much.
When do you feel like a man? Like, I'm a real man? When was the last time you felt that, and do you feel that?
You know, the irony is I'm writing about such soft and tender things,
yes.
But in order to bring all of this to the world, I'm completely activated in my warrior consciousness again. I'm as willful, if not more willful, than I was when I was trying to overcome my family, more willful than when I worked for Eddie Greenspan in trial law, more willful than when I was building economically to buy my first house. All of those things were nothing compared to how willful I am now. So I experience my masculine energy, what we call masculine energy, in this assertive way that I'm living and managing so many realities now in my life. I feel like my intentionality is more aligned with the heartfelt feminine intentionality in terms of what I'm endeavoring to bring to the world, but the way in which I have to do it feels completely masculine. You know, based on what we've called masculine. I mean, begs the whole question of what does that really mean? But for me, willful meant masculine and receptive meant feminine. And as a result, I experience much more of my masculine. In fact, I miss more of the feminine. I miss my receptivity. I miss the sensitivity, that I was in for many years as I explored the other side of my willfulness, the softer side of it, you know? Yeah.
Thank you. Do you think that women are more evolved than men in today's world?
Well, you know, I feel as though we're all fragments of possibility by contrast to who we can be as humans, how truly magnificent and wondrous this human organism is. Um, but, you know, if I imagine my vision of a healthy human, I am generally of the view that there are far more women that embody something close to that than men do in the world at this stage of development. I think that many men, even some of the most conscious men, and that includes me at times, are still lodged in survivalist structures. You know, the vigilant male armored consciousness, the willful consciousness, the protective consciousness, the warrior feisty consciousness, the ready to take off the gloves at any minute consciousness. Now, that's a reflection of where the world is. It's not an accident, and of course that's part of what perpetuates the world being there at the same time. That's the irony of it. But because I really equate health with a very open heart, I think that I encounter far more women who are closer to the open heart than men. We're lost without you, right? You know, we're now at this point, I think this is very clear to most of us, where if we don't let your relational way, your horizontal model of consciousness, if we keep buying into these patriarchal, lone wolf meditation warrior, heightened consciousness models, that is that your most inclusive or heightened experience in your life comes alone on the meditation cushion with you and God. The dude in the cave for 40 years only drinking milk, right? We then move out into the world in that consciousness, not particularly caring about other people. Because then we then see through that patriarchal consciousness our connection to the other as substandard to the experience of God that we have alone. Because the feminine generally finds the God experience in relationship and in the horizontal model. In fact, that creates and engenders a way of being that is more responsible and compassionate and conscientious and protective of the earth and its inhabitants. If we don't move in the direction of this wisdom and find it here and begin to develop models for consciousness, you know, and understand that the most advanced human experience is a relational one. That is that love or connectiveness is the portal, and that where you go alone here is nothing compared to where you go here. Women have known this since time immemorial. It's convincing my brothers. It's the heart. If they just had a little taste of the beloved, they would understand. But if they're too armored, they can't have a taste, so they don't know what we're talking about. They just think we're crazy. And then they go off and do their damage, and that's the problem. You know, everybody needs a taste of the beloved, and then they'll stop acting out so much.
That's interesting, because for me, I feel like I've spent many years in relationships, and that was a certain kind of learning. Now I'm really enjoying just, you know, doing me and God, and almost like, I'm almost wondering, like, will there ever be a time for me to be in a relationship again? I don't know, to be honest.
You might be swinging, you know, finding balance by swinging in the other direction and finding learning in the other place. There's learning in all of these places.
Yes.
It's just a question of, you know, when it becomes too polarized, then we know we have a problem. I'm sure that as the feminine rises, and I believe continues to rise, and I'm hopeful that that's what will happen on this planet, that we will reach a point where it becomes too polarized, and we need to come back to something more where there's more solitude, or individualism, you know, or willfulness. For me, for many years after being feisty and edgy and fighting my way through everything, punching my way through life and law and knocking on doors to make a living and fighting with my mother and all of that, going into therapy and going into massage therapy even, just peeling away layers, opening a heart, knowing that there was pain inside of this body that I didn't even know about in my willfulness and my headiness, was absolutely essential to my process. I couldn't write the way that I'm writing if I hadn't had that experience. So, I mean, we kind of go back and forth, I think, and I do feel that for me, the healthiest place is probably a little bit more in the direction of receptivity than willfulness. But that may be because I've done willfulness so well and for so long.
The healing journey is definitely with both feet on the ground.
Has to be.
So it's going in, going deep.
Got to go down to go up. It's an embodied experience, right? I mean, it has to be an embodied experience. It can't be anything other than that. And, the whole New Age disconnect from the body's an illusion, the Eckhart Tollean eradication of the ego, the pain body is simply something that evaporates through witnessing it. I mean, that's so ridiculous. It's beyond imagining. And when the real, everything that Alexander Lowen wrote about in bioenergetics feels right to me. I said to him, what is spirituality? What is it really? He says, it's not a concept, it's an experience. You just go into your body and enliven your body and clear the stuff out of your body, and you become spirited. And it's very simple for him. This dismissing of the emotions thing is so, we understand what happens when the monkey mind runs amok. We understand what happens when the neurotic stuff rules our life. We understand that that's a problem. But the answer is not to eradicate the emotional life. The answer is to learn how to work through the emotional material so that you can clarify your consciousness. I never grew in my spirituality except with respect to my emotional material. I don't even understand how you grow in something called spirituality, if it's an embodied experience, as I believe it is, without working on your stuff. Because what happens is the working through the stuff clears out space inside for your path to reveal itself, number one. If you're all bunked up, you don't even know what day it is. That's the first. And the second thing that happens is, to the extent that you work through your core issue, whatever your core issues are, you transform your consciousness. You mature spiritually. That's the grist for the mill right there. And I had a wonderful dialogue. I went to Maui a few times to hang out with Ram Dass and dialogue and debate with him about spirituality. Part of it was related to the film Carmageddon that I'm in with him, but part of it was I just loved talking to him.
Yeah.
And I went down there and we talked about soul shaping. It was after the first edition had come out, I think. And we debated, how do you transform in your consciousness? What has to happen? And I said, well, why don't you just work through your stuff? Your mother, your father, your family of origin material. He didn't want to do that. He wanted to bypass that. He said, well, you have a stroke. You have to have a stroke. And I said, why do you have to have a stroke? Why can't you just work through your mother's stuff? So we debated for 2 days. It was really intense, actually. I wish we had filmed it. It was fantastic. He hated my soul-shaping dictionary because it had so many psycho-emotional terms. He didn't want to deal with any of them. He called me neurotic. He said it was all neurotic. And I called him a spiritual bypasser. That was the conversation. You're a neurotic. You're a spiritual bypasser. Fantastic conversation. And at the end of the day, he said that I was right. Because I brought him back to the material from the family of origin, which really is, and the events of our lives relationally, which really is the most profound grist for the mill possible. How do you become a higher level being if you don't deal with that lower vibration material? You can't.
Yes, I agree.
It's just a big lie, but you really can't. You can't just call it a story and it goes away, because that story is in the cells of your being, it turns into cancer, and then you die. Your story rules the day. So you either deal with your story or your story deals with you. It's up to you.
So now, do you think that everybody has such depth and such stuff to work through? Because aren't there people that kind of have a pretty light life and not much, raised in a nice family? Like, what about them?
Maybe, it's so interesting to me that the most brilliant people I've met are the ones who seem to have had the hardest life. So did they choose it in order to become that? Is this a requirement for becoming that? That I don't have the answer to that question. All I know is I can't be him and he can't be me, and that's just the way it is.
Yes.
I don't get it. I used to think they're not alive, they're not conscious, they're not awake, they don't know from what, but I don't know if that's true. Maybe they're just more balanced.
Do you believe that we're all one?
All one what?
All part of one.
One big ocean?
Sure. One big consciousness.
This is polarized, right? So there's two polarities. One polarity is the bypassing, what I call the New Cage movement, focusing, the bullshit non-duality movement, talking about non-duality and removing everything they don't want to deal with from the non-dual field, the emotions, the ego, the body, the personhood, the storyline, all of it's not true, but they call that non-dual. So there's a version of all one, which is that we're all part of this ocean, the human ocean, whatever you call it.
Yes.
Of course we are.
Okay.
But if you go too far in that direction, then you evaporate the self, which is what they're trying to do in their efforts to bypass their material. It's self-avoidance masquerading as enlightenment. If you go too far in the direction of its all self, that is, that the self is magnificent, the self has so much to do here, the self has the greatest calling and purpose, now you're moving in the direction of narcissism, where there's consciousness has no awareness of its connection to a unified field. So for me, the work, all of our work, is to find that perfect, sacred balancing point between the oceans of essence and our individual droplet of meaning in the heart of it. That to me is what I call a Western consciousness. It's an integration of a Western and an Eastern consciousness. It's the Western emphasis on a healthy self-concept, a strong sense of self, proud but not unhealthily proud, and the wisdom of the Eastern consciousness, which is don't think you're all that because you're just part of this unified field and you're going to be gone and then someone else is coming to take your place. To me, you really have to find the balancing point between the two of them, and often people don't. They go in one direction or they go in the other direction, and to me that's not a healthy consciousness. So I let myself be seized by my mission, by my sacred purpose to write, whatever this stuff is that's coming through me, whatever the next book is, whatever that is. And at the same time, I never think I'm all that I'm going to change the whole world, I'm going to make the biggest difference in the world. If I go too far in the direction of I'm all that, I can't create. And if I go too far in the direction of I'm just part of the unified field, but I'm not significant, I also have nothing to say, right? So I have to find the point right in the middle. And I think we all do.
So what is your spirituality?
To me, this is all spirituality. I call reality spirituality. I mean, to me, the most, for the moment, spiritual person is the one who's holding the most, what I call enrealment, the most integrated, inclusive consciousness. So I'm aware of the ocean and I'm aware of the self. I'm aware of the fact that what I have to do after this call. I'm aware of my bigger picture purpose. All of it is existing. I'm aware that I need to do the laundry. I'm aware that at the end of a book process, I always have fruit flies and I better deal with them and clean up the... I'm aware of all of these things at one time. To me, that's spirituality. It's being in your body and it's being present for the entire experience. What's happened is it took on a different meaning in the New Cage movement and in the bullshit non-duality movement, which is that spirituality was basically, going to places that felt more comfortable and running away from everything not comfortable. So in other words, if you say, I don't forgive that person for that behavior, they say that's not very spiritual. Now that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. I mean, first of all, you don't have to forgive everybody. That's ridiculous. But independent of that, the non-forgiveness is not non-spiritual. It's nonsense. That's the New Cage movement, and we have to stop buying into that because it's killing people. What's happening is they're leaving their bodies, they're leaving their stuff, they're pretending all of it isn't there, they're floating up above the earth, they're not grounded on the human plane anymore, and everything falls apart. They believe they're going to wish for it and it's going to happen, and they lose the house, they lose the car, they're sleeping in their car, if they have a car at all, on Maui, thinking they're enlightened. I've met many enlightened masters sleeping in their cars in Maui in California. I know you have too. And, really all of them have bought into this ungrounded version of spirituality. Spirituality is everything. You want to be spiritual? Show up for everything. That's spiritual. There are no realized masters here, Melissa. They're not here. We're not there yet. Some people get a glimpse or they perfect a thread, but in terms of an inclusive consciousness, nobody's realized. We're just not ready to see God in the mirror, so we need to project it onto somebody. Who are your heroes?
I would say people.
Yeah, man. There you go. Right
You
on.
know what I mean? Like, I love people. Yeah. I love people. I fall in love with people and just the spirit of humans. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about forgiveness, the process of forgiveness. Like, I agree that, I've been just seeing in my own life, I can think that I have forgiven, but then yet my body really hasn't. It's like, oh my God, there's a whole other level. Like, it's a really long journey. But I tend to think that the ultimate journey at the end is that it is forgiveness. So whether I do it in my lifetime, but the moment that I die, I feel like I do forgive everything. Does that make sense to you?
You know, I think this idea that we got to prioritize forgiveness of other almost before we prioritize forgiveness of self and healing of self is part of the ungrounded spirituality movement. It's another big lie, and it's imprisoning people in terrible, terrible ways. I think we need to stop thinking about forgiveness, and I think we need to start talking about healing our experiences. And my experience has been that if I just heal my experience, which can include self-forgiveness for being involved, for example, in situations I shouldn't have, and all of that as part of my learning process, sometimes at the end of that complete process, which people seldom go through, all the way through to the end of the process, which is hard in our overstimulated world, sometimes I just arrive at forgiveness organically. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to talk about it. Nobody has to talk to me about it. It happens. It happens because I've gone through my process. Sometimes I go all the way through to the end of my process, and I don't have a charge about that individual so much, but I don't want to forgive them. I think that their behavior is unforgivable, and if they're seeking forgiveness, it's between them and God, and they can work through their own forgiveness process. So what? You know, I think this is another way that the New Age movement controls it. They're all talking about forgiveness. I don't think any of them even know what they're talking about. I just don't buy any of it. It's you know, I mean, somebody shoots your mother, and you go through a grieving process and a rage process and all kinds of real stuff, and at the end of it, you just don't want to forgive the putz. You know, doesn't mean you really want to kill him. You don't want to think about him, and you're not really charged about it. But why do I have a responsibility to forgive him? I don't understand any of it. I never have. To me, it's a perversion of reality. It's either there at the end of the process or it isn't there at the end of the process. I would really rather we focus people who have been victims of experiences on healing their victimhood. You know, not getting lodged in their victimhood, but really showing people how to move from holdings and repressed material and toxic stuff that's inside of them all the way through, moving it through the body like bioenergetics people were trying to do, until they come out at the end of it feeling liberated from it. And then forgiveness will be there if it's there at the end of that process.
Okay, so it's not necessarily that you don't believe in forgiveness. You just don't believe that it should be pushed. It's some like
artificial forgiveness will kill everybody.
I hear what you're saying.
It'll kill you, and then it'll also make you later suddenly want to kill somebody. Just heal the stuff and see what's waiting for you.
And see what happens.
That's it. I'm not opposed to it. I just want it to be the truth.
So have you forgiven everyone for everything?
No. No, I haven't. No? I have no intention of forgiving everybody. No.
Really?
No.
For your own self.
What's the point of forming an intention to forgive if you don't forgive them? I mean, it's if I move to the next stage on my healing journey and I arrive at more forgiveness, I've arrived at it. It's okay. It's the truth. But it's not going to come through conceptual thinking. It's going to come through the embodied experience.
The body. If
I
body...
do more work in my body, I'll do more work in my body. I'll move more stuff. I'm just tired of the lies. Because you know what? A friend of mine died in the spring and killed herself.
Oh,
and
sorry to
who
hear
was really trapped in the New Age movement. I didn't know her. I only knew her on Facebook. But there was something was happening. And she turned to me and then she said she was going to kill herself, and then she did. And she had really expressed to me, she had really bought into these mantras and had stopped doing the work on her emotional body. And then all that material caught up with her. She was forgiving everybody, and then it all caught up with her.
Wow.
And she hadn't forgiven anybody.
I hear what you're saying.
It's no game. This is no game. Detachment is a tool.
Yes.
It's not life. It's not a life.
Yes.
You can use detachment methods when you need to save your life. I've used them. But if you can come back down into your, all of those characters, they're very good at telling you how to float above your body. And we need to sometimes. That's their wisdom. But don't think they're enlightened. Don't think they have it all figured out. And don't think they're not just preaching to themselves because they left their bodies. They know how to tell you how to leave your body. When you're being attacked, when you're under horrible circumstances, you need to get the hell out of here.
Yes.
But then what? Who's teaching us what to do then? We got to teach people how to come back down here and work through the material that lives inside their bones so they can actually be here again. And telling them to forgive the aggressor before they've healed their anger is ridiculous. It's almost, I can't even believe we're even talking about it still in this world. But we are. Are. The bypass is everywhere. The spiritual bypass comes in so many different forms, and we have to begin by calling ourselves out on how we bypass from what's held in the bones of our being. And that includes me. I do it all the time. It's a real process.
How do you see us creating peace on earth with all the spirituality and religions that exists right now? Like, how do you see us uniting?
Anything that seems to make any sense to me, as a way of, as like a conceptual way, like what can move us in the direction of a more loving, benevolent world, is sacred purpose. This idea that you come into this being with a purpose, and blazoned purpose, encoded in the bones of your being. It's not a hurtful one. It's not malevolent. It doesn't involve destruction. I mean, we have to accept that. And that really we all have these callings and gifts and abilities that we're here to live through. Jack Kennedy said, happiness is full use of one's powers. And I always love that, Happiness is full use of one's powers. So if we move everybody in the direction of understanding that they come in here with this magnificent droplet of meaning living inside of the bones of their being, and teach children this, to find those gifts, to find those callings, because, for me, when I found this writing thing, and I knew it was in me, and I knew was going to come to it, it made me less hurtful. It made me less destructive. It gave me an understanding of why I was here, and it infused my life. It became a buffer against the madness of the world. If we just teach sacred purpose to everybody, we're not going to want to hurt anybody anymore. That's my only understanding. I have no other understanding of how we take all that madness out there and find some other web. I mean, rule of law is important. Creating a safer world is important. The rise of the feminine is deeply, deeply important, because my brothers will destroy this planet. We all know that's true. And perhaps that's the most important thing of all.
Is there anything you'd like to say in closing?
No, I think I said a lot.
Well, thank you. Thank you for watching, everyone. Thank you for being with us, Jeff Brown. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you'd like to continue this evolution, please consider donating at mrmusic.com. And thank you for watching. See you next time.
See ya.